My name is Randy, and this is our story. Dan's mom and I divorced when Dan was about 5, and I think Dan had some anger over that whole situation. And as he grew up, he always had that outgoing personality, could meet people, and was always very bright. But there was also then this rebel that came out as he was growing up. Didn't like being told what to do. When Dan was a senior in high school, we had just moved into a new house, and it was the first time we had finally given him his own bedroom. And when football season ended, he said, "I'm out of here." And he moved out and went to live on his own because he didn't want the rules and structure that existed in our house. We heard stories about parties and issues there, and then there was an underage drinking party that the police came to, and there were a bunch of citations given out, and Dan got some fines, and there was an OWI in there at some point. And so when you start to see those things, you know that this is not normal growing up experiences of a young person. Dan wasn't living with us, and we would go for long stretches without much contact with him. It was hard to really figure out what we could do. Until finally, it got to the point where Dan had lost his job and lost his apartment, and he was living with a friend. We knew that the drinking issue was out of control. His friend's family finally had enough of Dan as well. It was the day after Thanksgiving, and Dan had been with us for Thanksgiving Day, but then that night things apparently got out of control with the family he was staying at. They called my wife and said, "We're bringing Dan home. He can't stay here anymore. We're bringing his stuff with us." I was at work, and he showed up there, and they literally dumped everything off that he had in our parking lot. And Dan came in and talked to me, and I said, "You can't come home in the situation that you're in, but I will do everything in my power to support you in treatment." And I had anticipated him coming, so I had actually looked up some phone numbers to call for treatment options for him at that point. And he said, "I'm too proud to do that." And I said, "I just want to make sure I understand where you're at. You're too proud to go and get help, but you're not too proud to get so drunk that the people that you're living with can't take you anymore. Is that where we're at?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, you can't come home under those circumstances." He called a friend, and the friend came with a truck and picked him up. And at that moment, I wasn't sure I was ever going to see him again. About 2 days later, Dan called and said, "Will you help me get into treatment?" I said, "Absolutely, I'll be with you 100% of the way." And that started the road to getting our son back. I think too many times the stigma that comes from people being afraid of what other people will think prevents them from getting the help that they need. The Mooring House and STEP gave Dan the professional help that he needed. You know, we as a family knew there was a problem, but it wasn't something that we could fix. We could support. It would be like me trying to take care of my own medical problems, do my own appendectomy surgery, or set a broken leg. I can't do that. I know there's something wrong, but I can't fix it. And so the programs between the combination of Mooring House and STEP gave Dan the help that he needed, that we could support him as a family in getting through, but that we could never have provided on our own. Mooring House was a great experience for Dan because it gave him some structure. It gave him an opportunity to get connected with STEP because Dan was not working at that point in time. And so it gave him a chance to get a job and get some work experience and realize that the shame that people felt from admitting that they have an addiction is not nearly as bad as the shame of being addicted. I'm not sure enough people know that the programs even exist. And so, we can do more to promote and make people aware that this alternative is out there. Dan is like, he's a true prodigal son. That's a great story of how Jesus taught us how to live. But he came home. And, the things of the past are the past. What's the value of a life? If the programs turn one life around, then how do you put a number on that? How do you value putting a family back together? Literally, our prodigal son came home. He's a mile away from us today. We see them often. He has 2 great kids. He has a great job. Becky has a great job. It is a miracle. If we save one person's life, then everything that STEP and Mooring programs accomplish is worth it. I want to say thank you. Thanks for my son back.